Howdy, this is episode 102, and the topic is recycling. Why don't we do it? A few demographic information at the beginning here. You are probably listening to this on podcast, pod.co. Our podcast page is pod.co/Climate Union. We're on Patreon, patreon.com/Climate Union. If you donate on Patreon, you'll hear a really cool, awesome theme song that's coming up, but I want to pay the musicians for their time, so donate. Patreon.com/Climate Union, and I'll answer any question on there first. Our website is science-solutions.org. You can email me at usablesciencesolutions@gmail.com. About me a little bit. As the nonprofit current holder of Climate Union, a little bit about TJ Roddy. I recently graduated with my PhD, or PhDizzle, from Simon Fraser University in Vancouver, Canada. I'm not from there. I'm from Minnesota, the United States. So that was kind of a 2,500-mile difference from the middle of the continent to the coast, but I really enjoyed it. And I learned a lot. What I learned most about is that people don't think the same as you. Right and wrong is a binary solution to how we look at things in the Midwest. But there's not always a right and wrong, especially when it comes to climate change. How do we tackle it? I've tried to explain to my students in undergrad teaching that you can attack any problem by putting on your glasses, and one lens is time and one lens is space. Time and space. So every problem, environmental or otherwise, can be looked at with those two lenses, time and space. With climate change, we can kind of go a step further and go with the MEG 3 approach, that is mitigation, adaptation, and geoengineering, the MEG 3 approach to climate change. So, mitigation, to switch to the V to vocab part of the show, mitigation means to lessen the effect of something. Adapt means to adapt your way around the problem. And geoengineering is always the one that gets the headlines and is a cool, can we out-engineer our way out of this problem? Can we send up space mirrors and that will reflect enough sunlight so that the Earth won't warm as much as we need it to, as much as we want it to? Geoengineering. Mitigation, adaptation, and geoengineering. That's the approach to climate change that we should be looking at. So, how we look at it is something I learned from graduate studies, getting my PhDizzle, is that not everyone thinks about things the same as you. So it's really important to get multiple perspectives on the problem. If the problem is climate change, then let's sit around a table or listen to a podcast and hear different ways of thinking about it. There's not one easy answer to climate change or global warming, as Always Sunny from Philadelphia seems to think there is. There's not. So, our topic today is recycling, part of the lessening or mitigation part of climate change. It's something that I was really proud of my 4-year-old the other day. He saw that I threw away something that was recyclable, and he went into the trash, got it out, and put it in the recycling bin. I was so proud. It actually wasn't a recyclable thing, but I was just proud that he took the time and effort to correct my carelessness. Mitigation. So, as I said, there were 5 parts of every show in the intro. So going into the sci-fi into reality in part of recycling is, can we recycle everything? Asking that big question. I thought that we couldn't recycle everything, and mainly a lot of my colleagues are working on microplastics, which are everywhere on planet Earth. So, can we recycle everything? How about human bodies? The two choices of what to do when you die and put in your will is you can either be buried or cremated. And there's another option now. You can become a garden. You can get composted. I don't know if I'm ready for that yet, but if you get buried, you essentially do become compost. So it's something I will be open to in the future. Sci-fi into reality. So can we compost or recycle everything? I think we can. The other thing, as the second part of the show, is what really breaks my beakers. So what really breaks my beakers currently is always having to tell someone when they get too far off topic, focus, get on point. Was there a point to this story, or was you just making conversation? In the pandemic time that we're in currently, people might miss that time to sit at a bar and ramble on about BS. So I don't, because that was never really my scene, but I think in lieu of people going to the bar, they are now approaching their neighbors and talking about things you don't care about. And I want to tell my elderly neighbor, focus, like I can tell my 4-year-old to focus. This is what we're doing, focus. And that's different if they're doing like art or something. But like if we're exercising or playing a sport, then you should be focusing. Do we need to focus in on climate change? Yes. If we put on our goggles of time and space, the time to act on this is now. We need to start making climate change a rearview mirror item, not something in our future that someone can maybe figure that out in the future. It's going to be our generation and our children's generation and their children's generation issue. Because if I remember reading anything in graduate school, I read The World Without Us. The Earth doesn't care if we're here or not. We should care if we're here or not. So, let's focus. Back to recycling. The third part of our show is, there's an algorithm for that. When I was teaching last semester, the students really didn't want to care how I identified an oak tree. They just kept saying, there's an app for that. And I used to think there's not an app for everything, especially if you're out of service, like in the woods hiking. But more and more technology is catching up with us. And to stand as a point, every student got out their phones, took a picture, and with a free app said, yep, that's an oak tree. So there's an app for that as kind of a lame way of deferring learning, but there is an algorithm for climate change in the MEG 3 approach. Let's just figure it out. Let's science our way out of this. Speaking of science, that takes us to V for vocab, and recycling is our theme. The vocab word of the day is Gaia. James Lovelock coined this term. Gaia means that the earth is a living, breathing, self-regulating organism. And it doesn't care if we're here. It's going to readjust. It will adapt itself. And for sure that's true. But Gaia, besides being a really cool name, is something that we need to think about. And when I attend scientific conferences, yeah, I sit through most of them in my technical section, but I wasn't really listening to air quality issues because that wasn't my direct field of study. But the atmosphere is a part of the Earth, and it is something that climate change directly affects. So I'm glad I took some notes during those presentations instead of, ask questions and wonder when the next beer break was. The fifth part of every episode is live climate. So instead of live climate, where I interview with another scientist or general everyday Joe or Joan, this is what I'm getting you excited for next month, which I'm going to have on the show a fish and wildlife officer from the United States government. And if you want to ask a question about what you think is important for climate change, so you should join Patreon and submit a question or email me at usablesciencesolutions@gmail.com. This is Climate Union. I am TJ Roddy. Thanks for tuning in. Tune in next month when our live climate portion will have a fish and wildlife officer on. Thanks for hearing me, and feel free to unionize and join at patreon.com/climateunion.